Hi, I'm Ashley Adamson. Got my tea today. It's tea time. We're going to cover style, and we're going to talk about that in the context of being a trans woman because it's not exactly the same as being a cis woman. There's just different aspects in your body and things to navigate, as well as kind of like a history to also work with. So we're going to dive into that today. I'm just going to sip some of my tea before we get started. I'm drinking some nettle tea. I don't know if you've ever drank that before, like stinging nettles, but it's supposed to be anti-inflammatory, which is something that I want. So, style. My style has evolved. I started with just wearing all black, and then I've moved into color. You can see my wardrobe over there, kind of like it's a lot of black, and there's some red, and there's some blue, and there's some really nice things. I'm wearing the nicest dress today. It's pretty cute. You know, you can kind of do spins in it. And it's supposed to be for salsa dancing, but I don't know how to salsa dance. But yeah, so evolving your style, I think like when you start transitioning, one of the things is like, what kind of like clothes do I buy? And like, what is my style? Because my style was obviously as a different side, and now I have to kind of switch over. And it's expensive, it's overwhelming because you have to buy a whole new wardrobe, and you probably have some of your old clothes still around if you've just started out transitioning, right? So my approach to this has been to do it iteratively and do it small, and looking for pieces that I feel like have longevity. That's something that I think some people make mistakes on, is they follow trends and they kind of stick to following trends. I personally believe following the trend is a recipe for being generic, not really expressing yourself, and also being wasteful because your clothes are going to go out of trend pretty quickly. So what I recommend is finding a look that is classic for you and to keep building on that, because every purchase you make is compounding in adding value to your wardrobe. Over time, you then have enough pieces where you can continue to wear them, you can go out, and you can change clothes into these things, and you never really have to get rid of something. If I did like the internet meme style, where like the style right now, like a lot of e-girls, for example, that e-style where things are like very bright, and they're pink and they're blue, and they're just very internet meme, that is going to run out of style pretty quickly. And once it does, you're going to be like, well, I can't wear this because it's too meme-ish. So I avoid any clothes with like labels or brands on them for that, because those things are just they're going to run their course. And I find that a waste of my resources. So the best way to find classic things is to understand the overall environment of what the style is, and to take and pick. You can take things that are trendy and reintegrate them into your own wardrobe, and I think that's a really great way of doing things. Another really great way is to go thrift shopping, and this has many like positive effects. The first thing is, if you're thrifting, you're not spending a lot of money, and it gives you the ability to actually buy a lot more clothes to experiment and figure out what your style is. And then second of all, you're picking from a catalog of styles across multiple generations of style, which gives you an opportunity to kind of like take something that was trendy and turn it into your own thing, because it's kind of left the trend cycle. And this is also how style evolves, because when you look at the fashion industry, you have high fashion, which looks actually at street fashion and like low fashion and brings it up into high fashion, and it kind of like filters down through the multiple layers until like, you know, so like something that appears in high fashion, it takes a few levels, it takes a few years to kind of get down to like everyday fashion, the kind of stuff you see in H&M and like Forever 21. It starts at a very high level and kind of moves down, and then eventually, once it's been tired and kind of been worn out on kind of like the street level, people that are innovating their style with the street style, it moves back up to the top, because that's where a lot of fashion designers find their inspiration. One of these styles I think that is a good example of this is health goth. I don't know if you've seen that, but that's sort of like or tech wear. That's sort of where it's like black, it's very ninja, it's very Instagram friendly, it looks really cool. I've had personal inspiration from it but like it's very trendy. And if I were to buy some of those things, they'd be, cost me a lot, and then they just run out of, it'd lose its life. So when thinking about a style for yourself, I think it's important to think of the context, to think of the trends, and to experiment and find what feels right for you, and to do it as cheaply as possible. Because you're probably going to find that a lot of the stuff doesn't work for you, and that's okay. What you really want to do is just discover what is good for you. And to do that, you got to try things. One of the other challenges of evolving your own style is looking at something and saying, that isn't me. And that is problematic thinking, because if you have the, it isn't me, and you're not pushing yourself, you're not really going to evolve your style or create anything that really like signifies you, because you stay within a box. Now, over time, as you start to understand yourself more, you can kind of like know where to push things. But if you're looking to innovate on your style, the first thing is to not kind of like stick to what you have done. And so another thing is colors. Colors adds an additional layer of complexity, because then you have to think about like what matches, what looks good together, and how you're going to work with all these pieces. And you have to then buy a much larger wardrobe because you need all these matching pieces. I personally recommend sticking to monocolor and starting there and building out, because then your system in your wardrobe becomes more modular. So like back to my wardrobe over there, most of the stuff in here is black, and it's black for a reason, mostly because I stuck to black because it was like my spiritual journey. But I've recently added color, and I was very cautious about the color that I add, because if you just add all kinds of color, it gets a little hard to manage. You now need a lot more things. And when you go shopping, your focus now just becomes like, oh, what's that? What's that? What's that? What's that? And I guess like that's the other thing. When you're shopping, if you don't have a focus, it becomes hard to kind of start to meld together these ideas that you have. And a great way of melding together these ideas, I'm going off on many topics here, is creating a style board, creating an inspiration. So you can look at magazines, but I don't even know who looks at magazines anymore. I guess the doctor's office is when you look at magazines, but do not get your style from the doctor's office, okay? That stuff is very generic. We want unique. We want something that stands out for you. So what I do and what I recommend to other people looking for style is to go onto Pinterest and to pull out inspiration and put it together onto a board. So you have a visual language of things to help you triangulate what you want. I was working with one of the people that I worked with last month on coaching them, and she wanted to express her style in a way that she had a hard time articulating, but then we put together a Pinterest board, and what we found was that a lot of the stuff that she wanted to work with, which was more grungy, goth, she could actually work with that by just going to a secondhand store and just buying some of these things during thrifting, rather than spending a lot of money trying to buy like this very on-trend stuff that's like 2 or 3 times the price. And that's typically the case. Most of the stuff that you want is actually already there in a thrift store. You just have to go looking for it. Now, I could probably make a whole thing on thrifting, but I'll tell you this one tip that's super important. If you like something or something looks relatively good, just grab it. And what I do is I assemble like maybe 15, 20 clothes, and I just like put them over my arm. And once I have all of those, I go, oh yeah, that's good. That looks nice. That looks nice. I then go to the changing store, and then I just do all of them, the changing area. They say 5 items only, so, it depends on where you are, but sometimes I just sneak in and just take all the items with me. I haven't had a problem doing it thus far, and I'm respectful about returning them. But, back to the color. If you start with a smaller color base, it means your wardrobe becomes more modular. So what I did is I started with black, and as I added on clothes, I would be like, oh, I have a black jacket now for this black blouse, or I have a black top for this black skirt, which is really nice and really easy for me to kind of work in a constrained form. with creativity, and this is just for all creativity, with creativity, constraints will make you more creative. Where have you found that you've been most creative and you've done some like serious problem solving? It's probably where you had the most constraints, right? Constraints are a really powerful way of creating things and creating creativity itself. Because if I just gave you a blank canvas and I gave you 100 different colors and I said, use whatever you want, you're gonna spend a lot of time trying to figure out which color to use because you have so many colors to choose from. And that slows down the process and that like makes it a little harder to just start working. So if I just gave you black and said, start painting with this, maybe you're gonna focus more on the form, maybe you're gonna focus more on the expression of it, maybe you're gonna start to notice the paint drops and how those like take shape. But if I gave you a bunch of colors, maybe you'd just be focusing on the colors and wouldn't be working on the actual content itself. So this is why I find working with less colors is really good for like just establishing your style. You start with a color, start with like 1 or 2 or 3, and then build from there. And as you discover what you like and what you don't like, you can kind of eliminate things. Body. So, trans girls, how dysphoric do you feel sometimes when you put on something that doesn't work for you? This is a problem, especially with internet shopping, because you can't tell how you're gonna look in it. And what I've learned is how to work with the body and the form, because it's a little bit of an optical illusion when you're wearing certain clothes. And so you have to find what works for you, but generally speaking, I'd say most trans women have like this wider rib here. And it's good to think about the tapering. So my tapering is right here and it kind of like goes out, so that looks nice. But if I just do this and stand, oh, my hips look pretty good there. If I just do this and stand, you can see that there's some curvature, but not a lot. And it doesn't, it's pretty square. So you have to find what kind of works for you and find how to kind of de-accentuate your shoulders. Most of the time I have issues with like shoulders that are like this because my shoulders will look very wide in comparison to my body. And I have some dresses which will actually make that. I have one dress that was a mistake that made it look like that. So when you're buying clothes, you have to start to learn how to create the shape and the illusion of the body that you want. Now you can buy things to put underneath your clothes to add curves. Like I used to have a thing to add hips, but it's just like, it's so annoying. Like I don't want to deal with it, so whatever. But I still could use it. But yeah, like I have some really tight dresses that don't really work sometimes. And so you have to find ways to create this illusion of making your shoulders smaller so that way it can work with your hips, or just exercise to change the way your body is. And that's like dieting and stuff. There's a million topics on style and we could probably keep going. So I'll probably make another video later. I'd love to hear kind of tips from you and some things that you've used to evolve your style. And I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.